art is being neglected. I sort of want to talk about that for today, mostly because you can just see it so plainly if you have eyes to see, right? Because look at how the culture has shifted away from art. And this, I don't mean to kind of make a historical parallel here, but the Weimar Republic, right? Or the Weimar Republic, whatever. It's shift away from like something like art can take two forms, right? Art can either be good for the spirit or bad for the spirit. I know that kind of sounds stupid because art would generally be good because it's a self expression of oneself or of the nature of whatever it is. But if the nature is evil, like if it's trying to tell something evil, then it can only lead to bad, right? And this would have to be sort of with, like I said, the Weimar Republic, where, the art in question was like destroying people's lives instead of promoting health, right? Or promoting, goodness or righteousness or justice. And we kind of have the same parallels today where our culture is broadly neglecting art. And I'm not necessarily talking about AI. AI is just going to happen now. It's just inevitable. Unless, people do things with the data centers. But that's besides the point. What I'm trying to say here is the culture is in free fall when it comes to art. It is. And we have to work to get it back. We have to push ourselves artistically. I mean, supposedly the Dark Ages happened, the 1600s or whatever, the Middle Ages, and then all of a sudden the Renaissance out of that. So how does that happen? Enlightenment. And I'm not necessarily agreeing with the enlightenment of other cultures. Obviously, I've said this before, other than Christianity. But enlightenment in the sense of one caring about something or like one putting as much effort in as possible to achieve the goal, right? The stated goal. Like, because what's happening is everybody, like, because artists obviously are usually the last thing within the culture, right? So if you're building a foundation for a society, you need to have like the food resources, you need to have the system, the social standing, whatever, and then like politics as it goes higher and higher. And then generally one of the last things that are in the society is artists or like people who make art. And the reason why they're there is because in a sense they're sort of useless, but at the same time they're the most valuable thing you can have. Because look at Rome, right? The art, we still look at it and magnify it today, even so many years later. And yes, I understand that, Rome had pagan gods and, all this other stuff. I get that. But even then, therein, through their artists, you can see that they were wishing to create something and not necessarily bring utter destruction to its own empire, right? Because they were striving for something more. Like that sort of seems to be the theme with a lot of cultures that have survived for so long, to the fact that they, like, even though the physical remnants of them are gone or are dying or decaying, you can still see their cultural impact. I mean, we are a republic, are we not? So, my point is, like, we shouldn't be throwing these things to the wayside. We shouldn't be, like I said, neglecting art or saying that it's not worth its weight in gold, because it is. And we should be striving for better stuff, right? And this sort of gets into like consumerism, where art is neglected because of consumerism, right? If everybody's just buying the cheapest goods possible, then the people who are putting the time in and the effort in to make the things that matter and are wonderful and beautiful, they don't get a chance to shine, especially in a hyper-capitalist society, which is sort of the tone we're heading. I said that I played Fallout in another video, and this is why I love the games, because they're fucking awesome. Like, they predict the future so well. So well, because like everybody thought that, our future is going to be like Cyberpunk, or our future is going to be like a Brave New World or something akin to that, but it's much more animalistic in how it's approached, right? Because we fight over resources. We do. We fight over resources. We fight over very, like, animalistic things, even though we're made in the image of God. Which is quite ironic, isn't it? That we go from having thoughts like these of incredible grandeur, I guess you could say, to, basically stabbing somebody in the side to steal a fucking chocolate bar. Really, for me, I just don't want to see art fade away. Because what happens is everything else fades away with it. Like I said, art's at the top of the food chain, right? Realistically, like, granted, it doesn't get to eat first, but it's one of the most important things out there. And this, when I say art, I really mean anything under the creative atmosphere. Like, that could be engineering. There's a lot of art in engineering, infrastructure. I mean, there are things that matter that push us as a culture. Once again, whether as good or bad, but you can push the culture to be better with art. You can't do that with the basic necessities. You can't. I mean, because what happened? Like, look at what's happening, right? Is that instead of, like, our basic necessities obviously push us to do evil or good, but they don't push us in a direction forward. It's only regression. So, like, the fact that art is the peak of the culture and then it regresses. And believe it or not, you can see this in actual historical cultures like Egypt, right? Egypt's a great example. Or even, like, I used Rome. They went from making marble statues, or Greeks or whatever. They went from all this Pythagorean, whatnot, to just being, broken shambles of themselves. Now, whether that was from conflict, I don't know. But the conflict can destroy art because of the conflict. But yeah, I mean, the Egyptians now, they don't even, like, nobody knows how the pyramids are made and all this other stuff. So the fact that art was so highly valued for them, it shows in their craft, right? Like, hopefully I don't butcher this, but clearly they must have known something about ratios, right? Because if you stack the moon and the earth on top of each other end to end, and you draw the angle from the top of the moon down to the bottom of the earth, you actually get the same angle as the Pyramid of Giza, or one of the pyramids. I can't remember exactly which one, or maybe all three of them. But my point is the fact that, these mere coincidences, if you want to call them that, are just too coincidental, right? Or, like I said about ratios, using the golden ratio, you can, by placing a golden ratio in a certain way, you can get, well, here, I'll try to explain as best I can, but by placing, I think it's like 1, 1, 3, 5, 7 or whatever it is, by doing that and then cutting off, like taking a circle circumference and making that off of the middle section of the diameter that you've already made, you can get the perfect ratio of the moon and the earth, right? And hopefully I explained that well. I probably didn't, but I can see the image in my head, and hopefully you can too. There's a guy who actually talked about it. I think it was like Phantom Universe or something like that on YouTube, and it's these cultures loved art. They did. They loved art. They had to have, because why would you strive for something so perfect? I mean, why would you? For knowledge, I'm sure, but with knowledge comes art. I really think that Jesus Christ and the Father and the Holy Spirit are the greatest artists I've ever seen. Their poetry is beautiful. It always circles back. It's really amazing. When you take the time to realize how perfect the things were that lined up and how it says so much about us as people, it's just amazing. Hopefully you can kind of see what I'm saying here, and I'm not sounding uninteresting or not making sense. You know what I'm saying? And I feel for the artists that, are trying so hard in a society that wishes to kill them, right? So I learned a couple weeks ago, or maybe even a month ago now, that governments are trying to get rid of specific words in dictionaries, because if you cannot conceptualize the word, how can you, or like the meaning of the word, how can you understand its impact in your life? So, like, let's say freedom, right? Or let's say, choice, right? I prefer the word choice over freedom, because, like, freedom has a connotation of, like, you hear like pro-patriot, whatever. And I am a patriot. I'm just saying, it gets lumped up with a bad crowd, excuse me. Whereas if you say choice, it's much more of a, you do have the choice to make things. Like you do. Like you may not be free, but you have the choice of being free. See how that kind of works?